Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke heads to the Hill this morning to give lawmakers his semi-annual report on the economy, and congressional leaders are expected to grill the Fed chair on his exit strategy for trillions of dollars in financial stability programs. Republican Congresswoman Michele Bachmann of Minnesota is a member of the Financial Services Committee. She'll be questioning the Fed chairman later today. Congresswoman, thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Alexis, good to see you again, too.
You know, I had an opportunity this morning to read his op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal. Not sure if you have had a chance to read it yet, but it appears as though he's setting himself up with the American people and his constituents to say, here's what we've accomplished thus far, here's what we need to do to get out of it from this point forward. Is he giving you the kind of information you need?
Well, I think the Federal Reserve did a very good job in this piece this morning. I read through it very quickly, but I think there's more answers that members of Congress will want to have. We're at a very interesting time right now, as you know, Alexis, a confluence of activities. For the first time, our deficit is over $1 trillion. Couple that with 9.5% unemployment, looking to go higher. The Obama administration gave a far rosier scenario, and of course, as you know, under Humphrey Hawkins, the Federal Reserve Chair is supposed to tie economic policy with the president's economic policy. And here we have the President of the United States wanting to give even more power over private business to the Federal Reserve. And we don't even know what the overnight loans are that come from the Federal Reserve. So I've joined with 242 other members of Congress to have passed the Federal Reserve Transparency Act so we can receive a full audit of the Federal Reserve and release that to Congress before 2010. Before we give the Fed any more power, they have a growing balance sheet. I think it's incumbent upon the Federal Reserve to have a little bit more openness, a little bit more transparency. And we have 242 members of the House. That's a strong bipartisan coalition. I think it's time we audit the Fed.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to David Wessel about this at the Wall Street Journal this morning, and he said, you know, look, Alexis, the fact that this many lawmakers are in unison together to suggest that transparency is essential tells you something about the role of the Fed in today's environment. As you know, Congresswoman, I mean, it used to be that they were sort of in uncharted territory. Nobody can kind of touch the Fed. Now the Fed actually has hired a lobbyist. So will the next 2 days be a referendum on the future of the Federal Reserve Bank, or a referendum on where the economy stands today and what he has or has not done to help it?
It will be on both, and it'll be all of the above. And I think it really begins with the extraordinary action that the Federal Reserve took back in March of 2008, when for the first time since their inception, they opened the Federal Reserve's discount window to Bear Stearns. That was shocking to members of Congress. $29 billion they opened to Bear Stearns. And we know what happened in the months after that. We saw essentially 5 investment banks on Wall Street, and then suddenly in a week's time there were no investment banks on Wall Street. I'm not laying that at the foot of the Federal Reserve, but I'm saying we've seen extraordinary action since that time. As I said, their balance sheet has ballooned, and it's time that Congress knows what that balance sheet looks like at the Federal Reserve. So I think the Federal Reserve Chair will be treated well by the committee, but I think we'll see penetrating questions asked of him. And the public really is expecting answers because of the extraordinary time that we're in financially.
And, you know, a lot of people are talking this morning about this report from the Special Inspector General, Neil Barofsky, about the potential of $24 trillion in losses due to some of the programs we put in place. What was your immediate gut reaction to that, and will that be a part of the Q&A today with the Fed chairman?
It will be, Alexis, because this is an astounding number. We're still coming to grips with the fact that we'll probably be $2 trillion in deficit by the end of the government's fiscal year. Couple that with a potential downside of $24 trillion in risk, and right around the corner, we owe $53 trillion in unfunded federal liabilities for Social Security and Medicare Part D. We're not in a good, sound situation right now. That's why the Chinese are very concerned about buying our debt. We need to be on a strong financial footing so that we don't see runaway inflation, so we don't see a reduced value or a weakened dollar. We can shore this up. It's possible, but we have got to have an exit strategy. from bailout mania. We cannot have the federal government take over and own or control any more of the private business profits. Today, we own or control approximately 30% of all private business profits. If President Obama gets his way, that could raise to 47% if the government nationalizes health care. That would be a mistake.
Just to interject here for a moment, if you had your option, would you keep Ben Bernanke as the Fed chairman?
Well, I think Ben Bernanke is a good guy. He's I think, worked under very extraordinary circumstances, and of course that will be the president's decision. But I think that we can have our best answer, Alexis, if we can get true transparency, true accountability. That's why it's imperative that we pass this bill and that the Federal Reserve is audited. After all, the American people have the right to know all the money that's theirs, that's been committed by the Federal Reserve.
Excellent point. Congressman Michele Bachmann, thank you so much for taking the time. I'll be watching you today.